I want to tell the world community that while we will always put America's interests first, we will deal fairly with everyone, all people and all other nations. We will seek common ground, not hostility, partnership, not conflict. And
the vision and future planning of the United States and the restructuring of the globe into a new world order is not limited to any particular US president, since globalism is a goal that may span 25 years plus. The maximum two-term limit of a US president is about 8 years. This is the reason why there are men in the shadows who steer national and foreign policy in a certain direction. The globalists work through groups such as the Bilderberg Group, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Club of Rome, and the Vatican, which has insinuated itself as the New World Order religion, but encompassing all religion through interfaith. These groups and organisations have built a framework that US presidents must work within, or risk being assassinated. The chilling infiltration of both American and European institutions is widespread. The Knights of Malta, Opus Dei, Knights Columbus, Freemasonry and Skull and Bones, which are secretly subservient to the Vatican and controlled by the Jesuit order. This is why you see George Bush making the Skull and Bones sign while receiving communion. One can also discern the level of papal involvement by the behaviour of John Kerry. Donald Trump, like his predecessors, must work within the system, including working towards globalist ambitions such as the Club of Rome's plan to divide the world into 10 manageable regions, with the Pope as the supreme ruler. We only have to be reminded of what happened to JFK, who rebuffed globalists, intelligence agencies, secret societies, and the Roman Catholic Church, even though he was a Catholic. JFK did many things contrary to the objectives of the deep state and the Vatican. He wanted to de-escalate involvement in Vietnam, dismantle the Federal Reserve, stated he wanted to smash the CIA into 1,000 pieces, and to his detriment made a speech that greatly displeased the Vatican about the subject of separation between church and state. JFK was essentially a New World Order nonconformist who had to be eliminated.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control.
The event surrounding the assassination of Abraham Lincoln was another event that has been whitewashed by historians and academics. The irrefutable connection to the Jesuit order at the Vatican has been buried under a mountain of frivolous information. Statements from Lincoln himself have been omitted that tell of his anxiety towards an unseen battle with the Pope. Charles Quinniqui, a close friend of President Lincoln, was a disillusioned Catholic priest who had left the Catholic Church and become a Presbyterian minister. He confirmed that the Vatican was behind the Confederate cause, the death of President Lincoln, and that Lincoln's assassins were faithful Roman Catholics ultimately serving Pope Pius IX. The Vatican assassin was John Wilkes Booth, aided and abetted by other staunch Catholics. Mary Surratt, Lewis Powell, George Asteros, David Herold and John Surratt, who were coached by a Jesuit priest. At the time of the trial and hanging, the US government decided to hide the Vatican conspiracy from the public, in case of a public backlash against Catholics from an overwhelming Protestant majority. A psychologist stated in TheAtlantic.com that Donald Trump has personality traits of narcissism, disagreeableness, and grandiosity. These personality traits seem undesirable. In many respects, it is a safeguard from the tyranny of the establishment, and the men in the shadows. If you look at those removed from power, like Saddam Hussein, Muammar Gaddafi, as well as leaders whom the US wants to remove, like Assad and Putin, they all have one thing in common. They are independent thinkers, not willing to be a sock puppet for globalists, unlike Hillary Clinton. Donald Trump would be more likely to do things his own way rather than heed the counsel of advisors of think tank groups and the Jesuit order. Obama was surrounded by Jesuit-trained advisors because he, like Bush, Clinton, and so many other presidents, are not the real power behind the political throne. However, Trump, like Kennedy, is reliant on the Secret Service to protect him, aircraft mechanics to make sure his plane does not crash, and master chefs to make sure his food is not tainted. Trump will have to make concessions or risk being assassinated.
Well, with Putin, I have nothing to do with Putin. I've never spoken to him. I don't know anything about him other than he will respect me. I don't think Putin has any respect whatsoever for Clinton. I think he does respect me. And I hope I get along great with him. It's possible that we won't, Jeremy. I hope that we get along great with Putin because it would be great to have Russia with a good relationship. Right now, we don't have a good relationship.
The purpose of that infiltration was what for?
Well, the purpose is what the Roman Catholic system has all the time as her own purpose, is to infiltrate, to penetrate all the areas of life where the Roman Catholic can have control and access for the coming world government. What that means is, in preparation for that world government, the Roman Catholic institution, especially since the establishment of the Jesuit order in 1541, throughout all these 500 years, they've been in preparation and through infiltration and penetration of every level of society in order to take over the world politically and religiously. There are two doctrines that define very well these dangerous goal of the Roman Catholic institution. Two doctrines define this very well. One is called the doctrine of the apostolic succession, and that is dealing with the papacy. And the other is the doctrine, the temporal power, and that is dealing with world government.
The founders of the CIA, which replaced the OSS, Office of Strategic Services, were Alan Dulles, a Knight of Malta, Harry Truman, a Freemason, and William J. Donovan, who was also a Knight of Malta. Every director of the CIA has had some connection to the Jesuit order, through either a secret society, a Jesuit priest, or a Jesuit education. The CIA vet potential US presidents, often grooming candidates or sabotaging them, like the Trump hot mic incident. Here it was apparent that Billy Bush egged Trump on while recording him. Billy Bush is a member of the Bush dynasty. The Bush family are deeply involved with the CIA, the Vatican, and Skull and Bones, a secret society that makes their initiates carry out immoral acts or confess sordid details of their lives. These initiates can then be controlled or blackmailed if they start to think independently outside the order. The Parliament of the United Kingdom is controlled in a similar way. Both the House of Lords and the House of Commons are mostly controlled by MI5 or MI6 through blackmailing or destroying individuals with recordings, such as videotapes of politicians engaging in bad behaviour, such as soliciting prostitutes and even pedophilia parties. That is the secret of how politicians are controlled or destroyed by intelligence agencies. Since 9/11, the only director of the CIA who has not been Jesuit trained was Michael Morrell, who is a member of Skull and Bones, a society controlled by the Jesuit order. James Clapper, staunch Roman Catholic, is Director of National Intelligence, a position that makes him an advisor to the President and generally an overseer of all intelligence agencies. The Vatican now controls intelligence agencies, which gives the Jesuits a carte blanche to carry out operations not only in secret, but at the expense of the everyday American taxpayer.
An astonishing admission by the Roman Catholic Church. They run the CIA. Did you know the CIA is also dubbed Catholic Intelligence Agency? Catholics in Action. Is the CIA truly American? For decades, Jesuit affiliates of the Roman Catholic Church have directed the CIA. Leon Panetta and John Brennan, the current director, are Jesuit trained. Are Jesuits today the same as Jesuits of the past? Are you familiar with the Jesuit oath? its devious plans to control the wealth of the nations, enslave the masses, and depopulate the world. Pope Francis is a Jesuit. Should we be alarmed that the institution the Pope heads also controls the CIA? The CIA's mission is to identify and destroy terrorists and fundamentalists. Pope Francis likewise, and defines them as those who believe in absolute truth, end-time prophecies of Daniel and the Revelation, refuse to yield their liberty of conscience, and give up constitutional rights. The insidious agenda of the Jesuits will soon be realized, as Pope Francis has been hailed Lord of the world and Savior of the earth.
What does CIA stand for?
The Central Intelligence Agency.
That is correct. That is what the CIA stands for. Now, do you know what the primary job of the CIA is?
I think their primary job would be similar to the police force, but more the head of law enforcement.
Now, Marianne, what is the primary job of the CIA?
I believe it has to do with foreign intelligence.
The CIA is the foreign spying agency for America.
That is also correct. Now, they collect, analyze, evaluate, and disseminate foreign intelligence in order to help make decisions that relate to national security. So you're right.
So, Jerome, can you guess what religious group has predominantly run the CIA?
I would assume Christians or Catholics.
Now, can you guess what religious group has predominantly run the CIA?
I'm going to assume or guess the Catholic religion.
That is correct. Why do you guess that?
Because I figured that they might have a lot of involvement with the CIA.
Now, the CIA has been predominantly run by Roman Catholics, and a high percentage of them have been members of the Jesuit Society.
Yes.
So do you know who Jesuits are, Marianne?
Kind of, yes. I was raised Catholic, so I'm familiar with Jesuits.
Okay. And what can you tell me about Jesuits?
Well, they seem to be more liberal priests, I guess.
All right, so they are a male congregation in the Roman Catholic Church, as you know. And so what we're going to do is just read the Jesuit oath, okay? So have you follow along. It says,
I furthermore promise and declare that I will,
when opportunity present, make and wage relentless war, secretly or openly, against all heretics.
I will hang, waste, boil, flay, strangle, and bury alive.
Rip up the stomachs and wombs of their women in order to annihilate forever their terrible race. So, Lucas, what are your thoughts on the Jesuit oath?
Well, based on that oath, I'm not too fond of the group. I haven't really looked into what else they claim to stand for, but it's kind of concerning to have a group, like you said, so involved in central intelligence and everything, and being so motivated by these values.
So what are your thoughts on the Jesuit oath?
The Jesuits are pretty bad people. Sounds like they want to kill people. That's not a good thing, is it?
Based on the Jesuit oath, the excerpt that we just read, what are your thoughts on Pope Francis being so impactful in social and political issues?
I think that we should keep our, separation of state and church. I believe that the Pope should stick to his religious issues, and then the government needs to handle the government issues.
So now, based on the Jesuit oath, because Pope Francis is a Jesuit, right? How do you feel about Pope Francis being so impactful in political and social issues?
I feel that's a sign of prophecy. So I'm not surprised. It's, the Catholic religion is a religion of a universal religion trying to get everyone in the world to follow their same creed. So that doesn't surprise me.
Wow, Sean, I was going to ask you now, are you aware that the Bible tells us there is a time coming when our liberty of conscience will be stripped away, and that those who stand true to the principles of Protestantism will not be able to buy and sell?
Yes, Revelation.
The Catholic Herald, which is a news publication for the Roman Catholic Church, gives us a new and interesting way to look at the CIA, or the Central Intelligence Agency. By professing right in the very front page of this Catholic Herald news, it states that the Catholic Church thrives in the CIA. The headlines read, "Why Catholics Thrive in the CIA." The agency has been dubbed, and I quote, "Catholics in action," end quote, because the faithful have occupied so many senior positions. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a plain easy giveaway, and it should not take a rocket scientist or anyone with great qualifications to understand that the Roman Jesuits, or should I say the Vatican, is the one that runs the Central Intelligence Agency. Make some very interesting notes here. Make note that the CIA thrives in the United States of America. It has the seal of the United States and the symbol of the United States right on it. The eagle is right there. Secondly, make note, the Jesuit order thrives primarily at the Vatican. However, what you need to understand is that the Jesuit order is a secret police for the Vatican, and what they have done is they have successfully infiltrated every other governmental structure in the world today. But they will disguise themselves as Roman Catholics, and that is because they are Roman Catholics. Just as you have Joe Biden, he is the first Roman Catholic Vice President of the United States of America. While he is the very first Vice President who is a Roman Catholic, we also have the very first Jesuit Roman Catholic leader, the Pope, Pope Francis. In case you missed it, let me go back and repeat myself again so you will understand exactly what I'm telling you. These Jesuits, though they infiltrate other governmental structures, they simply will never tell you that they are Jesuits, but they will tell you that they are simply Roman Catholics. Their allegiance belongs to the Pope. These so-called Roman Catholics, they are Jesuits, especially the ones who are in political structures or in judicial positions of power. The United States of America is run by Jesuits. They used the order of the Masons as scapegoats. The majority of people, the minute they hear the words Freemason, they automatically think the most evil secret society. But when they hear Jesuits, they think, oh, Pope Francis is a Jesuit, he's a good person, he's a Roman Catholic. I think the Jesuits are connected to the Roman Catholics. They have hospitals and schools and many other good institutions, so they're not that bad. But that's how they operate. They operate in a very subtle way. The evidence for this is that we see a reflection between America and the Vatican. The United States Capitol is designed to resemble the Vatican. The obelisk in the United States of America also is a direct reflection of the obelisk of Rome and the Vatican. The symbols of sun worship within the Freemasons and within the Jesuit order, it's all the exact same. Going back to the CIA, when we look at the symbol of the CIA, the United States seal, what we also
the attention placed on the NSA's mass surveillance of American citizens, it's easy to forget the other countries that are taking a page out of the agency's spy book. Just this past weekend, it was revealed that in 2008, Australia's surveillance agency shared information about the country's citizens with its most trusted intelligence partners. Perhaps the most concerning part of this recently leaked Snowden document was the discussion between these allies over whether or not to share the medical, legal, and religious information of Australian citizens. But this story is just a microcosm of the larger international spying cabal working together to peer into every nook and cranny of the world. So who exactly are these peeping partners? Well, they call themselves the Five Eyes, a partnership made up of intelligence agencies in 5 English-speaking countries: the US, the UK, Australia, Canada, and New Zealand. And just like the Eye of Sauron, eyes see all, which is an especially appropriate analogy since The Lord of the Rings was filmed in New Zealand. But I digress. You see, the Five Eyes Agreement has been around since the end of World War II, but it was so secret that the program wasn't even disclosed to the public until 2005. On the surface, this treaty is just a friendly agreement between allied nations that it's essential to stopping global terrorism. But thanks to the Snowden leaks, we now know just what an asinine agreement it's actually being used for: industrial espionage and circumventing those pesky laws that prohibit warrantless surveillance of a country's own citizens. In theory, these nations are not allowed to spy on each other's people, but we all know rules are meant to be broken. In 2007, the NSA analyzed and retained any British citizen's mobile phone number, email, and IP address swept up in its enormous dragnet. Another memo dated from 2005 shows that the NSA was working on a procedure to spy on the other 4 countries. And while one sentence in the memo states that the US and UK will not explicitly target each other, the very next sentence says governments reserve the right to spy on each other's citizens when it's in the best interest of each nation. Well, that's not open to interpretation at all. Look, I think it's clear at this point that the myth of the American empire exporting freedom and democracy really means exporting surveillance and subjugation. Guys, there's a lot going on in the world, a lot that you might disagree with. As much as we protest and complain to our elected representatives, it doesn't seem to shape the actual legislation put into action. Foreign policy is supposed to be drafted between the president and Congress, but that would be too easy, it'd be too democratic. So instead, legislation is now outsourced. Policy prescriptions are made by think tanks and NGOs like the Council on Foreign Relations, the Atlantic Council, and the Trilateral Commission. The idea of having academics researching world issues, pairing with world journalists to help keep our elected officials informed sounds like a good idea, right? Sure. But what happens when the policy recommendations are being made by the councils and think tanks whose board members are the CEOs of some of the biggest corporations in the world? Is it a conflict of interest that many of these councils are run by executives from almost every major industry, from food to media, and most shockingly, national defense? Let's take a look at just some of the few. Council on Foreign Relations. Their mission statement is in part sponsoring independent task forces that produce reports with both findings and policy prescriptions on the most important foreign policy topics. The question I ask is, what sort of policy prescriptions can we expect from a board of directors that includes Madeleine Albright and Colin Powell, both of whom served as U.S. Secretary of State, and Tom Brokaw and Fareed Zakaria, both two well-known establishment journalists? So, these folks aren't even in government anymore, yet they sit on the board of one of the most influential think tanks in the world. Now, if you doubt the CFR's influence, just take a listen of a clip of Hillary Clinton's first visit as Secretary of State to the CFR headquarters right here in Washington, D.C.
We get a lot of advice from the council, so this will mean I won't have as far to go to be told what we should be doing and how we should think about the future.
What we should be doing and how we should think about the future? Gee, Hillary, you're really letting the cat out of the bag there. Now, you may be wondering why you don't hear about these groups' influence from the corporate media. As I mentioned before, extremely powerful and influential media moguls sit on these boards. They are part of the establishment, and the CFR is only one of these groups. What about the Atlantic Council? According to the Atlantic Council's website, part of their focus is on drafting roadmaps for U.S. policy toward the Balkans, Cuba, Iraq, Iran, and Libya. Now, this is especially interesting because membership of the Atlantic Council includes some of the top defense corporations in the country: Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Northrop Grumman, and Raytheon. So why are the top defense corporations in the world advising our lawmakers on foreign policy? As we know, the revolving door between government and corporations never stops spinning.
The Bilderberg Group can be summed up in their goals and aspirations by looking at the founders. Joseph Ratzinger, who once studied to be a Catholic priest in a Jesuit seminary, was concerned about the anti-Americanism in Western Europe. He approached Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands, who then in turn contacted Paul van Zeeland of the Catholic Party of Belgium. Prince Bernhard contacted Walter Bedell Smith, director of the CIA, and facilitated guest lists through Eisenhower's advisor Charles Douglas Jackson, who was an expert in psychological warfare and director of the defunct OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, the forerunner of the CIA. So the Bilderberg Group founders consisted of royalty, intelligence service directors, a member of the Roman Catholic political party, and the influences of the Jesuit order Novitiate, Joseph Ratzinger. Enough said.
Well, secretive and elite. The Bilderberg Group unites the world's most powerful people behind closed doors. It's been happening for decades. Some even believe it's a venue where the world's most rich and powerful conspire to carve out a new world order. RT correspondent Abby Martin was in Chantilly, Virginia today to let us know what's happening outside of the Bilderberg Conference and joins us now to tell us all about it. Abby, nice to see you. So we have a lot of powerful people all in one room. Happens all the time. So what's all the fuss about?
Yeah, egregious violation of federal law. There's an act called the Logan Act, which says that you cannot meet with foreign diplomats without congressional oversight. And I think that that's really the main key here is people are like, hold on, why are there 130 of the most powerful world players in banking, mining, oil, food, media, defense, and politics? Why are they all getting together and meeting in secrecy behind closed doors without any congressional oversight or really any awareness of what it is they're talking about?
Breaking news tonight, the Pope in America. A rousing welcome for the man who's been called the rock star Pope. Rock star Pope Francis begins a historic visit.
The Pope, the two leaders will speak to the world, then hold a one-on-one meeting with only translators in the room, all before Pope Francis addresses Congress Thursday with Biden in attendance. Even though the president and the Pope are allies on issues ranging from climate change to income inequality to Cuba, even the Iran nuclear deal, the White House refuses to reveal what the two men will discuss. The White House refuses to reveal what the two men will discuss.
For the faithful who'd been waiting for hours, the emergence of Pope Francis shortly before 9 a.m. was the thrill of a lifetime. Thousands, led by the President and Mrs. Obama, waited to greet him. And after the official welcoming ceremony, both leaders addressed the significance of the visit.
And I believe the excitement around your visit, Holy Father, must be attributed not only to your role as Pope.
30 seconds left. Anything else?
Yes, I would like to just end with this note. As far as all the things that have happened while the Pope has been visiting here, the thing that bothered me the most is when he said Christ failed on the cross. And I did a report earlier in the day. People can go and look at it while I reference certain scriptures. But Christ didn't fail on the cross. He knew he was going to die on the cross, and he said, I'm giving myself willingly. So I was very disturbed to hear something like that.
He said that? I didn't know that. That was Christ's ultimate triumph.
Yeah, and he said he failed on the cross. There's an ABC News. I'm sure it's on multiple
Sounds like
other
something
news
the
outlets
devil
as well.
would say, Jakari. I think.
And if at times our efforts and works seem to fail and not produce fruit, we need to remember that we are followers of Jesus Christ. And his life, humanly speaking, ended in failure, the failure of the cross.
Flammas eius, Lucifer matutinus inveniat. Ille in quam Lucifer qui nescito casum, Christus filius tuus, qui regressus ab inferis, humano generis serenus iluxit, et tecum vivit et regnat in saecula saeculorum.
The Jesuits expanded quickly around Europe. One of the primary ways in which they went about reclaiming some of the ground that had been lost to the Protestant reformers was to establish schools of education in various locations. They went for control of the information flows, imagining, quite rightly, that by controlling education they could control knowledge and therefore control the worldviews and mindsets of coming generations. If you go to the Jesuit Boston College website today, you'll see a part where they admit, when in 1547 Ignatius was asked to open a school in Sicily for young men who were not Jesuits, he seems to have seen the opportunity as a powerful means of forming the mind and the soul. To bring people to God, he sought to form those who, in their turn, would form or influence many others. These schools that catered for children of all ages soon spread across the world as part of a covert campaign to turn people back to Rome. The key to it was that, unlike other Catholic institutions, the Jesuit schools actively encouraged Protestant children to enroll. This tactic gave them an opportunity to indoctrinate future generations with the rites, ceremonies, and symbols of Rome. They particularly wanted to target the children of rich and influential Protestant families because they knew that what was taught to them would have a trickle-down effect on the rest of society. Like Jezebel herself, the Jezebel spirit goes for the powerful men who will influence others. Jesuits also sent missionaries to far-flung places in the world like China, placing great emphasis on the importance of assimilating themselves into their culture. By educating themselves on the language and religion of these places, they could become teachers of the people and work their way into positions of influence. They were incredibly committed, hard-working, and disciplined in these tasks, pouring out their lives for the furtherance of their cause. Wherever they went, they consistently compromised their own message with the local pagan practices of the area to get a foothold, just like they'd done in Rome itself. When they returned to Europe from these far-flung places, they brought back with them the occult and pagan ideas that they'd picked up there. In Britain, the Jesuits made use of fifth column tactics. They started filtering into the country in the 1560s, and almost immediately they were found preaching from pulpits disguised as Church of England ministers. In 1568, a Jesuit priest posing as a Church of England minister accidentally dropped a secret copy of instructions on how to undermine and destroy the Church of England. After a search of his lodgings, further documents were discovered in his boots, including a license from the Jesuits and a bull from the Pope Pius, which authorized him to preach whatever was necessary to inflame animosities and widen divisions. They saw no better way to demolish churches than to infiltrate it in the guise of a minister who could introduce divisive false doctrines and ceremonies from the pulpit. The Jesuits also plotted to kill Queen Elizabeth I on many occasions so that the country could be returned to Rome. The Spanish Armada of 1588 was one such attempt to sail against Britain and overthrow the Queen, who was seen as heretical and illegitimate by Rome. The Spanish Armada was defeated, but true to the Jesuit oath, that which could not be achieved in the open was pursued in secret. After Elizabeth I died and James I took to the throne, Jesuits attempted to blow up the Houses of Parliament in 1605. the infamous November the 5th gunpowder plot led by Guy Fawkes, an event we celebrate in Britain every year. There were also murmurings and suspicions that the Jesuits were responsible for the Great Fire of London in 1666, although there seems to be little hard and fast evidence to support the theory. There was simply a mysterious book written in 1667 by a man claiming to be a Catholic Christian, in which he portrayed the Pope as fanning the flames that ravaged the city. In truth, the Jesuits were largely frustrated in Britain, but they did have more success in Europe. Having established themselves in Italy, Spain, Portugal and Austria, they set their sights on Germany, the birthplace of the Reformation. There they gained influence with the rulers and initiated campaigns of persecution against Christians. In keeping with their oath to stir up division and bloodshed in countries that were previously enjoying peace and prosperity for the sake of the Catholic Church, this persecution of Christians led to much disruption, war and bloodshed around Europe. They reignited the persecution against Protestants in Germany, leading to the 30 Years' War of 1618. Although Protestant Sweden stepped in to stop Germany from being returned to Catholic darkness, it left the country in ruins for a long time afterwards. In the neighbouring Austro-Hungarian Empire, Jesuits were so influential that they virtually controlled the emperor at the time. Having this power, they came pretty close to purging the region of true Christianity. In Poland, which was a major European power in the mid-16th century due to their embracing of the Reformation, Jesuits also became enormously influential. This influence led to a decline in national well-being and disastrous policies towards neighbours that eventually led to their annihilation. Entry into France was slower, but was achieved by the formation of educational institutions. Jesuits were implicated in the assassination of the French King Henry III in 1589 and his successor, Henry IV, in 1610. They believed it was their right to kill any heretical monarch. They took the initials INRI, which biblically represented the Roman inscription above Jesus' head on the cross, meaning Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews, and gave it a double hidden meaning which meant it is just to annihilate impious rulers. If you read their oath, you'll know that they paid no respect to rank or position. The French king, Louis XIV, was more to the Jesuits' liking though. Louis had a Jesuit confessor from childhood whose influence turned him into a fanatical bigot, unleashing terrible persecution against Protestants. Louis also led an immoral life, and the Jesuit confessor made careful use of his secrets to have him trembling at his feet for forgiveness. This was a common tactic by Catholic priests generally, to use the confessional booth to gain access to secrets that could be used for blackmail later. Knowledge is power. By 1685, the situation was severe enough for hundreds of thousands of French citizens to flee for their lives to remote areas, and those that stayed behind faced terrible punishment. This was in fact replicated all across Europe, where true Christians had to flee to communities in remote areas to avoid persecution from Rome. Some of these examples are recorded in Fox's Book of Martyrs. As the Jesuits continued to rise to power and influence in Europe, they also accumulated vast amounts of wealth and property. However, their scandalous greed, their loose morals, their ceaseless political meddling and their encroaching upon the clergy had stirred up enmity and hatred everywhere they had been, and this would lead to their downfall. Amongst the higher classes in particular, the Jesuits had been brought into complete disrepute. Governments began to realize that this single group were the source of nearly all the disruption in their lands. In fact, so severe was their cancerous activity that the Jesuits had become a threat to the very fabric of society. Nations could stand it no longer, and the Jesuits were systematically driven out from previously friendly Romanist countries during the period of 1760 to 1770. Although the Pope at that time, Clement XIII, still supported the Jesuits, the nations of Europe ramped up the pressure on him to take drastic action. The French government were particularly fierce in their protests against the Jesuits, saying in 1762, "The said institute is inadmissible in any civilized state, as its nature is hostile to all spiritual and temporal authority. It seeks to introduce into the Church and States, under the plausible veil of a religious institute, not an order truly desirous to spread evangelical perfection, but rather a political body working untiringly at usurping all authority by all kinds of indirect, secret, and devious means. The doctrine of Jesuits is perverse, a destroyer of all religious and honest principles, insulting to Christian morals, pernicious to civil society, hostile to the rights of the nation, the royal power, and even the security of the sovereigns and obedience of their subjects, suitable to stir up the greatest disturbances in the states, conceive and maintain the worst kind of corruption in men's hearts. Notice the very distinctive Jezebel or Asherah characteristics of the organization described here. The hostility towards all authority, the attempts to usurp it using manipulation and secret means, the desire to claim all authority for themselves. And remember that this shouldn't surprise us, as Loyola spent 3 days dedicating himself and his order to her in the form of the Black Virgin of Montserrat. With her at the spiritual helm, it of course displayed her characteristics. The pressure on the Pope became too much to ignore, and so eventually he reluctantly called a secret conclave in 1769 to bring into effect the suppression of the Jesuits. Mysteriously, he died the evening before the meeting could be held. It was strongly suspected, of course, that the Jesuits had been the perpetrators of the murder. The next Pope, Clement XIV, tried to reform the Jesuits to no avail, and after further pressure from the monarchs of Europe, he finally abolished them in 1773. A year later, he was dead by poisoning, with the Jesuits again at the top of the suspected list. At that point, the Jesuits were forced to secularize themselves, and on the surface at least, they disappeared from society, except in Russia where they were allowed to continue as normal. The Russians wanted to use their skills to subdue the recently conquered Polish people. In return for their help, the Russians would give the Jesuits refuge. Since it was the Jesuits who were largely responsible for the weakening and destruction of Poland in the first place, the people of Poland have more reason than most to feel animosity towards the order. With the Jesuit order more or less finished as an effective religious weapon, though, Satan needed to change tack in his continued war against Jews and Christians. This change occurred in the Age of the Enlightenment.
Pope Francis is ushering in a new era for the Catholic Church, and so are the crowds. Take a look at this image. It was taken on March 13th, the day Francis was elected.
One of the many challenges Pope Francis will face is getting the Vatican's financial house in order. Mark Phillips looked at the Church's history of secrecy and scandal.
The Vatican is more than the world's largest religious institution. It's a business in trouble. There are backroom financial scandals at Vatican Inc. In an old stone tower behind the papal apartment is the Vatican Bank. The Church's various departments, its priests and employees keep accounts here. Secret accounts, hidden from the prying eyes of international regulators. An Italian court investigating the bank found documents showing some accounts had been used for money laundering and other illegal, and for the Church highly embarrassing, activities. Vatican watchers like Marco Politi have studied the court documents that verified the bank's transactions have not always been kosher.
There was money of the mafia who was recycled through the channels of the Vatican Bank, and also bribe money to political parties in Italy went through the Vatican Bank.
With dark financial clouds hanging over the Vatican, the European Union insisted the bank open its accounts to public scrutiny. When it was too slow, tourists felt the pinch. When European bankers suspended the Vatican's credit card facilities, visitors couldn't use plastic to buy Sistine Chapel tickets. $30 million of Vatican money in Italian banks was seized and only released when the Church promised to reform. Now Swiss lawyer René Brulhart, who helped clean up other secretive European banks, has been brought in. But still the bank keeps many of its dealings private and not just from outsiders. South African Cardinal Wilfred Napier, who sits on a committee that's supposed to sign off on the Vatican's books, told us he still can't get the information he needs.
I'm one of those 15 cardinals that sits on that committee, and we sign our name to the report. I want to know that I'm signing something that is actually reflecting the truth.
There's another scandal with a girl who disappeared in the Vatican 20 years ago, and they say they may have found her remains. The Italian police are leading the investigation, but instead of helping them, the Vatican is obstructing the investigation. It's likely they knew about this and stayed silent. And on top of all those cases of pedophilia, this is just disgusting.
The list of controversial events involving Catholic priests or Vatican officials reads like a tabloid. Reports of sex abuse, pedophilia accusations, alleged large-scale corruption, and possible ties with the mafia. While the media, especially in Italy, has been having a field day with the scandals, the Vatican either stayed silent or rebuffed all accusations.
Well, David Lorenz, a director of a group called the Survivors Network of those abused by priests, doubts the new Pope will bring much change to the Vatican.
Nikki Davis says she was sexually abused by a Catholic brother, but she's no longer afraid to talk about it. Yet she says she knows of 2 other child abuse survivors who say they've been threatened not to talk to the Royal Commission.
Some victims are reporting having received death threats because the information, the knowledge that they have, their personal experience is too damaging to the Catholic Church.
Facebook in particular is the most appalling spying machine that has ever been invented. Here we have the world's most comprehensive database about people, their relationships, their names, their addresses, their locations, their communications with each other, their relatives, all sitting within the United States, all accessible to US intelligence. Facebook, Google, Yahoo, all these major US organizations have built-in interfaces for US intelligence. It's not a matter of serving a subpoena. They have an interface that they have developed for US intelligence to use. Now, is it the case that Facebook is actually run by US intelligence? No, it's not like that. It's simply that US intelligence is able to bring to bear legal and political pressure to them, and it's costly for them to hand out records and one by one, so they have automated the process. Everyone should understand that when they add their friends to Facebook, they are doing free work for United States intelligence agencies in building this database for them. And every other intelligence agency that can either hack Facebook or who can do a favor with US intelligence.
Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. The law was expanded back in 2008, and it allows the NSA to spy on Americans without a warrant.
And essentially, this would extend the government's power to warrantlessly wiretap Americans for another 5 years.
2 U.S. senators have asked the NSA just how many people it's spied on, but the agency's keeping their lips sealed, and you'll never guess why. They say dishing that information would violate your privacy.
Do you ever feel like someone's watching you? Well, if you're a UK citizen, the government is attempting to step up its public surveillance policy and even snooping on your personal emails. Despite CCTV cameras already a major fact of UK life, there's now plans to store personal data, including information from social networking sites. As RT's Ivor Bennett reports, it's the taxpayer who could be footing the bill.
Soon you could be watched everywhere you go in the UK, even where the cameras can't see you. All your emails, texts and phone calls will be monitored under a new anti-terror spy plan. The government will know which websites you visit. It'll even snoop on your private Facebook messages. No matter who you are, all your personal data will be stored for a year. in a massive surveillance operation privacy campaigners condemn.
Britain's already one of the most watched societies in the world. The number of CCTV cameras is estimated at nearly 2 million. Now the government wants to monitor all electronic communication as well, including social media, taking surveillance to a level never seen before.
Just what you say in calls and messages won't be kept, but the government will know exactly who you speak to, when you do it, and where you are. It'll be stored by broadband and mobile companies, but security services will have real-time access at the click of a button, secretly living your life with you. Digital rights groups say it'll leave people living in fear of Big Brother.
Last 2 years, every single tweet sent in the US has been stored in a massive archive.
It's the ones being watched who are paying for it too. Cybersecurity experts predict it'll cost taxpayers over $1 billion to be spied on. Even then, there's no guarantee they'll be safe from other prying eyes.
Clear yet why the FBI would neglect to tell activists that there was a potential assassination plot surrounding them. What we do know is that new documents obtained by the Partnership for the Civil Justice Fund, a U.S. human and civil rights advocacy organization, have revealed that the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, the U.S. military, and private corporations all cooperated together to monitor and investigate Occupy Wall Street protesters as, quote, domestic terrorists and, quote, criminals. Now, the more shocking revelation, the headline of this story, is that reportedly buried deep within the government file, mentions of a plan to use snipers to assassinate Occupy protesters and the movement's leaders in various cities throughout the country. These
video cameras caught trucks arriving at the World Trade Center from about August 23rd until every night until about September 2nd, September 3rd. And the trucks were arriving at about 3 o'clock in the morning when everybody else had left the building, including the janitorial trucks. And the trucks were leaving at 5 a.m. right before the AAA personalities of Wall Street got to work to start their day. Something was brought into that building that would help with the detonation. There may have been work done on the detonation before. It may have been going on for months, but whatever they needed at the very end, they came and brought in that 10-day period.
The purpose of that infiltration was what for?
Well, the purpose is what the Roman Catholic system has all the time as her own purpose, is to infiltrate, to penetrate all the areas of life where the Roman Catholic can have control and access for the coming world government. What that means is, in preparation for that world government, the Roman Catholic institution, especially since the establishment of the Jesuit order in 1541, throughout all these 500 years, they've been in preparation and through infiltration and penetration of every level of society in order to take over the world politically and religiously. There are two doctrines that define very well these dangerous goal of the Roman Catholics.
know if you guys know who have subscribed to this channel, I found what can only be described as reptilian symbolism right at the heart of the Vatican, in the Pope's audience hall. So I thought I needed to dig a little deeper as to what this actually means and how to decipher the actual symbolism. So stay tuned as the Outer Dark brings you 5 symbolisms of the reptilian Vatican hall. Number 5. First, some context. Yesterday I found a giant serpentine monument reinforced concrete by an architect that was known for building bunker-like public structures, indeed monuments out of concrete. It was built in 1977, so it's really old. In fact, it's been around there for a long time. But my first lead that something was strange was this window, and I said, that looks like an eye. It looks like a serpent's eye. So I dug a little deeper, and when I saw the audience hall from the back, where the back audience was seated, it really did take my breath away, since what was revealed was this right here. That is a giant, massive reptilian face shaped into the direct architecture. Everything from the slits in the eyes to the scales to the fangs, there was no mistake about it. But what's behind this hinted symbolism? And what can we see or glean if we dig deeper? Well, number 4, look at where the Pope is seated. We see him here from the back of the hall, that is in fact seated in the mouth of the serpent or reptilian. In the very mouth. This is symbolic of the Pope being the voice of the serpent, in fact speaking the serpent's words to the audience. This might well shake your faith. That is, if you're a Catholic, which I was. I actually went to Catholic school myself and was an altar boy. But here you can see it in plain view. Clear symbolism, clear evidence that something here is extremely wrong. This image hasn't been photoshopped. This is real. This is built right into the architecture that was designed by those within the Pope's inner sanctum. But there is more symbolism. For this, though, we have to go outside. Number 3. Do you see anything strange here? You're looking at the hall itself. Do you see anything weird? Well, if you look carefully, it looks like the head of a giant snake. Can you see it now? In fact, it's almost unmistakable. You can see the snake's muzzle at the front and you can see its eye. It just looks like a snake. To me, this is yet more connective symbolism that what's going on inside matches the outside. Because since here we can see serpentine architecture with ease. Number 2, let's head back inside and look at what the Pope himself sees. If the Pope is seated where he is, what does he see? Well, he sees a giant serpent with eyes once again. The audience is symbolic of almost the serpent's meal, and the Pope is not preaching to the audience under this symbolism, but the giant god-like reptilian creature himself. Why? Because this is what the Pope sees. Can you imagine that when they were designing this, that they designed this all by mistake? That this is some kind of high anomaly? No, because they spent literally years on the designs. They definitely would have known what the Pope would have seen from where he was actually speaking. Also what the audience was seeing. So this is very strange and it raises some serious questions. What is going on in the hall? Number 1. But the biggest clue, the biggest symbolism that tells us something is really, really wrong here is in fact what is missing from the hall, not what is inside it. Do you know what that is? Here is a clue. Now, think of the heart of Christianity and think of what symbol it has and think of what you do not see in this hall. You do not see any of it. That's right. There is no Christian cross. There is no cross in the entire building, at least no large statue, wall hanging, or anything. There's no other real Christian symbolism either. There's no Virgin Mary, there's no Joseph the carpenter. There is indeed nothing anywhere. All of these symbols are missing. But you might say, what about that 10-ton bronze statue that's seated behind the Pope, where, as the Vatican states, Christ is being resurrected from a nuclear apocalypse or a nuclear bomb? To which I would say, this, I believe, is a direct corruption of symbolism. That is, they've taken the former Catholic symbolism of Jesus Christ, and they've displayed it in a corrupted manner, therefore corrupting its meaning. This is just not the way that you display Jesus Christ in any kind of Christianic religious order. You don't display Jesus Christ with massive wings on his back, rising up from an atomic apocalypse. You just don't do this. Look at representations of Christ from the past, just to compare. Take a look. Now you can see that there's just a huge, vast difference here. Something is profoundly wrong. I mean, this statue, which weighs 10 tons, just looks like some massive thing, like a boss from some video game or something from some horror movie. You just don't display Christ like this. And also note on this, Christ appears to have massive wings on his back. Half of his face also looks like it's missing, like he's been heavily damaged by the blast. Is this really how you display Jesus Christ?